The billionaire tossed his Ferrari keys at a tired black mechanic and laughed. "Fix it, old man. If you can make it run, it's yours." The crowd burst into laughter, but the old man only smiled. What they didn't know, he once built engines like this for a living. And today their laughter would turn into silence. Stay till the end, and don't forget to subscribe. The afternoon sun glared over the billionaire's mansion like it was showing off its own pride. A crimson Ferrari stood in the driveway, polished but lifeless. Guests gathered around, holding drinks, laughing as if humiliation were entertainment. The billionaire, Mr. Carlton, was a man who loved control. Money had made him loud, arrogance had made him blind. And today, he'd found a new target for his ego, an old black mechanic named Walter. Walter had come to the mansion hoping for honest work. His hands were rough, his shirt faded, and his eyes carried the calm of a man who'd seen far worse days than this. To the guests, he looked like nothing, but that quiet confidence was something Carlton couldn't stand. "Tell you what," Carlton said, tossing the Ferrari keys with a smirk. "If you can make that thing run, it's yours." The crowd burst into laughter. Someone shouted, "He'll never even open the hood!" Another added, "That car's been dead for months. Even Ferrari's own team couldn't fix it." Walter bent down slowly, catching the keys before they hit the ground. His old fingers trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from age and memories. He looked at the car with the soft familiarity of a man greeting an old friend. He didn't reply to the mockery. He just smiled, the kind of smile that makes arrogant men nervous. Mr. Carlton folded his arms. "Go ahead, show us your magic." Walter walked to the Ferrari, tracing his hand along the curve of the hood. "Beautiful machine," he whispered. "Just a little misunderstood." He popped the hood open, and the laughter stopped for a second. Maybe out of curiosity, maybe disbelief. Walter stared at the engine quietly, his eyes scanning every wire, every bolt. Then, softly, he nodded to himself. "You've been tampered with," he muttered. "What's that supposed to mean?" Carlton mocked. Walter didn't answer. He rolled up his sleeves and began working, with precision, not haste. The crowd watched, half amused, half bored. But the mansion grounds grew quieter. Even the laughter began to fade as minutes turned to an hour. Sweat trickled down Walter's temple, glistening in the sunlight. He worked patiently as though every movement carried purpose. The billionaire yawned, pretending not to care, yet his eyes never left the old man's hands. Then with one last turn of the wrench, Walter stepped back. He wiped his hands on his shirt, closed the hood, and said softly, "Try now." Carlton smirked and pressed the start button. The engine roared to life, a deep, thunderous sound that silenced every laugh, every whisper, every doubt. The Ferrari wasn't just running, it was purring, perfectly. The billionaire's jaw tightened. The crowd gasped. Walter stood still, calm and quiet, watching the man who had mocked him now stare at his own car like he'd seen a ghost. "Sometimes," Walter said, his voice steady, "a machine only needs someone who understands it." The words hit harder than the roar of the engine. They weren't about the car anymore, and everyone there knew it. The sound of the Ferrari's engine echoed across the mansion courtyard, steady and proud, like the heartbeat of justice itself. No one laughed now, not one whisper. The only sound left was the deep hum of a machine reborn by the hands of a man they had just mocked. Mr. Carlton stood frozen. His smile had vanished, replaced by the awkward silence of a man who'd just been outsmarted in front of his own audience. He forced a laugh, trying to reclaim his arrogance. "Well, I suppose even a broken clock is right twice a day," but Walter didn't respond. He only nodded respectfully and started walking away, as if fixing a Ferrari was no more than tightening a loose screw. "Wait," Carlton snapped. "Where are you going? You're not seriously expecting me to hand over the car, are you?" Walter turned back, his calm eyes meeting the billionaire's glare. "You said if I made it run, it'd be mine." The guests shifted uncomfortably. They knew the rules had been spoken and broken. Carlton smirked again, his tone sharp. "Okay, come now, old man. You don't expect me to give away a Ferrari for free, do you? That car's worth more than you'll ever make in 10 lifetimes. Walter's face didn't change. "You're right," he said softly. "But dignity, that's worth more than all your cars combined." For the first time that afternoon, the crowd didn't know whose side to be on. The laughter that once filled the air now felt cheap, ugly. One of the guests, a younger man in a suit, stepped forward. "Sir, I've seen this man before," he said hesitantly. "That's Walter Reed. He used to work for the Ferrari engineering division in Italy." The crowd turned in shock. Carlton blinked. "That's impossible. You're telling me this old mechanic built Ferraris?" Walter gave a small smile. "Not all of them, but enough to know when someone has ruined one." Carlton's face turned pale. "Ruined?" he repeated. Walter walked toward the car again, speaking gently but with precision. "Whoever worked on this engine didn't try to fix it. They tried to sabotage it. I found extra wiring that doesn't belong here, loosened valves, and a cracked intake pipe. All deliberate. Someone wanted this car to fail, and you blamed the machine instead of the hands that touched it," the audience murmured. The word sabotage carried weight. Carlton's pride shattered piece by piece. His voice quivered. "You mean my own team?" Walter looked at him calmly. "Sometimes the people who flatter you most are the ones who fail you first." The billionaire looked around, his guests avoiding eye contact. He had built his world on pride, and now that pride was collapsing right in front of him. Walter didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice or demand attention. He just placed the keys on the car's hood and said, "Keep your Ferrari, Mr. Carlton. I came here to fix an engine, not to take revenge." And with that, he turned and began walking away. The guests stepped aside as he passed, silence following in his footsteps. Somewhere in the crowd, a woman whispered, "That man just humbled a billionaire without saying a single harsh word." And someone else murmured, "Now that's real power." Carlton stood motionless, his reflection staring back at him from the car's shining surface. A rich man with everything, yet suddenly feeling small. Mr. Carlton watched Walter walk away, each step echoing like a verdict. The laughter, the arrogance, the show, all of it had vanished into the same silence he once used to mock others. He looked at the Ferrari again. It was running perfectly, the engine humming like a promise kept, and yet he couldn't enjoy it. For the first time in his life, a car worth millions made him feel poor. "Wait," he called out, his voice cracking. Walter stopped at the edge of the driveway, but didn't turn around. Carlton hesitated, pride wrestling with guilt. "You really built these machines?" he asked, his tone softer now. Walter turned slightly, his weathered face half lit by the sun. "I helped build their hearts," he said, tapping his chest. "Engines are like people. They stop working when they're mistreated." The words sank deep into Carlton's mind. He didn't fully understand them yet, but they hit somewhere pride couldn't defend. A young reporter in the crowd had been recording everything on her phone. She stepped forward now, curious. "Sir, are you the Walter Reed, the engineer Ferrari credited for their 1990 prototype design?" The crowd gasped. Phones lifted, cameras flashed. Walter sighed, almost embarrassed. "That was a long time ago," he said quietly. "Before I lost my wife, before I stopped caring about fame and just wanted to fix things that were broken, including myself." The crowd fell silent again, this time with respect. Carlton's arrogance dissolved. "I didn't know," he murmured. Walter finally faced him. "That's the thing about people like you," he said gently, not cruelly. "You look at someone's clothes and think you know their story. But sometimes the ones who seem invisible carry the greatest stories of all." Carlton lowered his head. "You're right," he admitted. "I judged you without knowing who you were," Walter nodded. "Not just me. You judged yourself too, by your money, by your cars, by how loud people laugh at your jokes. But real worth," he paused, looking straight into Carlton's eyes, "doesn't come from what you own. It comes from what you give back." The words struck deeper than any insult ever could. Carlton looked down at his reflection in the shining hood of the Ferrari. For the first time, he didn't see power or wealth. He saw emptiness. The mansion, the cars, the people who clapped for him, it all suddenly felt like noise without meaning. Walter began walking away again, his steps steady and unhurried. But this time, Carlton ran after him. "Wait!" he said again, almost pleading. "I was wrong. You earned this car. Please take it." Walter smiled kindly. "You still don't understand," he said. "I don't need your car. I already have something you can't buy. Peace." Carlton froze, speechless. Walter continued. Fix your people the way I fixed your car. Remove the ones who loosen your bolts and corrode your trust. And maybe one day you'll learn to run again, too. Then, with quiet grace, he walked down the long driveway, the sunset painting his figure in gold and shadow. The crowd watched silently, not at a mechanic leaving, but at a lesson walking away. Carlton stood there for a long moment before whispering to himself, "He fixed more than my car. He fixed my pride." That night, Mr. Carlton sat alone in his massive glass mansion, surrounded by everything money could buy, but feeling emptier than ever before. The laughter from earlier kept echoing in his mind. Not the crowd's laughter, but his own. He replayed the moment he tossed the keys to Walter, how confident he'd been, how sure that money made him powerful. Now, every reflection in his luxury home showed him the same thing, a man who had everything, yet nothing real. He turned to the Ferrari parked in his private showroom. Its red paint gleamed under the lights, but he couldn't bring himself to touch it. Because it wasn't just a car anymore. It was a mirror showing him the arrogance he had lived with for years. Carlton whispered to himself, "He fixed more than the engine. He fixed me." The next morning his staff arrived expecting their usual, loud, commanding boss. But instead they found Carlton sitting quietly, reading a newspaper, and, for the first time, greeting them by name. "Good morning, Lisa. How's your daughter doing?" The young maid froze in surprise. He had never asked before. Later that day, Carlton drove the Ferrari, not to show off, but to find Walter. He stopped by the small garage on the edge of town. The place was simple. Old tools, faded posters, the smell of oil and memories. Walter was there, fixing a small pickup truck, humming an old jazz tune. Carlton stepped out of the Ferrari and said, "I came to thank you." Walter didn't look up right away. "For what?" "For showing me something my money never could," Carlton replied softly. "Respect," Walter smiled faintly, still turning a wrench. "Respect is like an engine. If you don't maintain it, it breaks down. You just needed a tune-up," Carlton laughed. "A real, humble laugh this time. Then maybe you can help me fix more than cars. I want to start something new, a foundation to teach young people real skills. Mechanics, engineering, craftsmanship. People like you inspired it." Walter finally looked up, eyes glinting with quiet pride. "That's a good idea. The world needs more builders, not just buyers," Carlton nodded. "Will you help me?" Walter thought for a moment, then said, "Only if we do it right. No fancy suits, no headlines, just work that matters." And from that day, the two men, one who had lost everything that mattered, and one who had once been forgotten, began building something that would outlast them both. Months passed. The Heart of Steel Foundation opened its first workshop. Young men and women lined up, ready to learn how to build and repair engines. But what they learned most was discipline, respect, and humility. Carlton often stood in the background watching Walter teach. He never interrupted, never took credit. He had found peace in being quiet, something he had never known before. One evening, a student asked Walter, "Sir, why do you still fix cars when you've already done so much?" Walter smiled and said, "Because every engine I fix reminds me that broken things can run again. Even people." Carlton heard those words and realized that was the true wealth he'd been searching for all his life. The billionaire who once mocked a black mechanic had become his student, and through that, he finally became human. Years passed. What began as a small workshop on the edge of town had become a movement that changed thousands of lives. The Heart of Steel Foundation wasn't just about cars anymore. It was about second chances. Homeless veterans, struggling youth, and people who'd lost faith in themselves came there to rebuild not just engines, but their own confidence, and in the center of it all stood Walter, the same quiet black man the world once laughed at. His hands were older now, his back a little more bent, but his spirit burned stronger than ever. He still arrived early every morning, cleaned his tools, and greeted every student by name. To him, success wasn't about fame or wealth. It was seeing a young person who once gave up now holding a wrench with purpose. One day, a TV reporter arrived to cover their foundation's story. She turned her camera toward Walter and asked, "What made you start all this?" Before Walter could answer, Carlton stepped forward, now dressed simply. No suits, no gold watch, no arrogance. Just a man who'd learned what true respect means. He smiled and said, "He didn't start this alone. We both did. He fixed my car, but more than that, he fixed my heart. And when someone repairs your soul, you don't keep that gift to yourself. You pass it on." The reporter looked emotional. "And what would you say, Mr. Carlton, to people who still judge others by their appearance?" Carlton turned to the camera. His voice was calm, confident, and humble. "I'd say this: never look down on anyone unless you're helping them up. Because the person you laugh at today might be the one teaching you tomorrow." The crowd behind him applauded. Many of the students had tears in their eyes. As the camera crew packed up, Walter sat beside Carlton on a bench outside the workshop. The evening sun painted the horizon in gold. "You've come a long way," Walter said quietly. Carlton chuckled. "No, we have. I used to think success was measured by how fast I could drive. Now I realize it's measured by how many people you lift along the way." Walter nodded. "That's the right kind of engine, one that keeps running no matter how rough the road gets." The two men shared a warm silence, the kind only earned through understanding. Suddenly, one of the students ran up, a young girl covered in grease but smiling brightly. "Sir, I got the car started," she said. Walter smiled proudly. "See? Told you it would run if you believed in it," Carlton added. "Just like people." The girl laughed and drove the old car forward, its engine humming strong, a symbol of everything the two men had built. As it disappeared into the distance, Walter looked at Carlton and said, "You see? Respect is contagious," Carlton nodded. "And so is kindness." The screen fades to black as their laughter echoes softly, followed by the quote, "Never underestimate the power of humility. It can turn broken lives into engines of greatness." Years later, the Heart of Steel Foundation became a beacon of change, a symbol that true greatness doesn't come from wealth, but from worth. Generations of students who once walked in lost and broken now left with confidence, skills, and hope. They didn't just learn mechanics, they learned life. And though time had taken some of Walter's strength, his eyes still carried the same spark that had once silenced a billionaire's arrogance. One quiet afternoon, he sat in his workshop surrounded by the sound of tools and laughter. He looked at an old photograph pinned to the wall about himself and Carlton, standing beside that same Ferrari years ago. A car that had started as a symbol of pride had become a memory of transformation. Carlton still visited often, though now his purpose was to listen more than to talk. He funded schools, scholarships, and new workshops, never for credit, only for change. That day, he walked into the workshop carrying something small and shining, the same Ferrari key that had started it all. "Remember this?" Carlton smiled. Walter laughed. "Hard to forget the day you threw it at me," Carlton nodded. "That day changed everything. I thought I was giving you a challenge, but really, you were giving me a chance to be better." Walter looked at the key, then at Carlton. "Funny how life works, huh? Sometimes the engine that won't start is just waiting for someone to believe in it again." Carlton placed the key on the workbench. "Keep it," he said. "It belongs to the man who taught me what wealth really means." Walter smiled, but this time his eyes glistened. "Wealth," he said softly, "isn't how much you have. It's how much you share." The camera slowly panned across the room, students helping one another, laughter echoing, and the light of purpose shining on their faces. We live in a world that measures success by what we own. But real success is measured by what we fix, who we lift, and how we love. Because sometimes the person who seems broken is the one carrying the blueprint to rebuild the world. The Ferrari key glints one last time under the sunlight before the screen fades to black. Respect has no price tag. It's earned, not bought. No matter how rich, powerful, or famous you are, true greatness comes from humility. Never judge someone by how they look or what they own. Because one act of kindness, one moment of respect, can rebuild more than engines. It can rebuild humanity itself. If this story touched your heart, remember, every act of kindness creates a ripple. Don't just watch. be the reason someone believes again. Subscribe to our channel for more real, powerful stories that open minds, heal hearts, and remind us what humanity truly means.